This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. Our title for today's podcast is Being Intentional with Shallow Work. Wow, I don't know anybody like that.
But the being intentional part or being involved with shallow work?
Being involved in shallow work, yes.
So what do you think it means?
Um, I think it means work that maybe we really don't have to do, and we let it sort of hijack us and put us in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Wait, are you talking about this morning?
Yeah. I'm talking about how my last 2 weeks have been totally. Um, and, you know, I have reached out to a couple of people and have said, call me out, because I just get overly involved in little things like, oh, I'm going to separate all this stuff downstairs, and then one by one, I'm going to take it upstairs and put it away, where I could have just taken everything at one time and put it away. So, yeah.
So this is really uncanny. Again, we do not talk about the topics ahead of time, but this is so spot on. So the idea is shallow work is a combination of the things that we probably shouldn't get mired down in. Maybe we could eliminate that. That can be a big portion of it. But it can also include those things that we have to do, like, some chores and maintenance things, just attending to emails. Some of it may be work related, some of it may be personal, but the experience most of us have, if we're willing to admit it, is that we get involved with it. We try and squeeze it in here and there, and then sometimes it becomes a rabbit hole, and we get caught up in it. I don't know, particularly if you have any kind of news or other, social media alerts that can say, oh, look at this shiny object over here, and oh, this over there. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, it's happening more than it should, because what is interesting is that I see it and I say to myself, don't go there. And then it's like, well, okay, you can go there. And then I go there and then I see another piece, and I'm not completing anything other than, being attracted to, those shiny objects that you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And the idea is we don't have to be like over rigid about this whole topic, but the Cal Newport wrote the book Deep Work, and Laura Vanderkam wrote Tranquility by Tuesday, and others have written on this topic. But we want to be putting in the big rocks, anchoring to that Stephen Covey analogy,
Right.
that you put the big important things in first, and then you put in the secondary, and then finally in his illustration, basically the water, the sand in the water, the little
Right.
stuff. The problem is the little stuff tends to, if we focus on that in a way that's not optimal, then it can consume the rest of our time, so there's no room for the rocks. And so we have to be a little, not as intentional, but more intentional, just as we would be on the big rocks, the deep work kind of stuff. And the deep work stuff is something that's going to either move us forward in a business or a personal way, in a significant way. All right. So yeah, doing exercises each day can be something like brushing our teeth. It's hygiene,
Mm-hmm.
but in time it can lead to health or maintain health. And so some of these tasks are like that, but we don't want to do them at the exclusion of all the other big rocks that we have to attend to.
Makes
So
sense.
what rocks of yours tend to get pushed to the wayside, for the little stuff?
Um, so one of the things that has been getting pushed to the side is, um, I want to create a new, I guess, connection on social media, because I had been reading about different things that you should do to grow your business. And I sit down intentionally first thing in the morning to do that. And it's on my calendar that I have 1 hour every morning. And I sit down and it's like, I'll get to that later. It looks like I have an important email here. And then I find out that I don't have important email. Then I start deleting things that I don't need in my email because I want that nice and clean. And then I find all these little tasks that I start doing, thinking, well, I'm now getting organized. So what I had scheduled maybe for 7 a.m. this morning to do, you know what? If I clean all this up, I can do that at 10 o'clock, but then I don't put it on the calendar and then it still doesn't get done.
So are you sure you're not just saying these things because it seems to be so spot on with our topic today?
No, because I've been thinking about this, and interestingly, I mentioned to a mutual friend of ours, Christy, that I needed some help in being to keep me on task, and for specifically a meeting that we do on Tuesday nights. And it's something that I really, really want to do, but I let all this other stuff creep in, whether it be my husband, my son, cleaning my desk. Something comes in and it's like, you know what? I'm not going to go to my Tuesday meeting because I'm overwhelmed and I've done it to myself.
Yeah, and it is all self-sabotaging things that we do, and social media and all the stuff online is really designed to, you know, aid and abet us in that distractibility.
Yeah.
And so there are ways to harness our attention, our focus, and get that stuff out of the way, but not let it have its way with us, so to speak. And so I really love this Tranquility by Tuesday by Laura Vanderkam. She's the one that wrote the book 168 Hours as well. But building on Cal Newport's work, where he talks about deep work, knowledge workers have to protect their mental time more because so many things can erode it, all that shallow stuff. And he thinks of shallow work as anything that isn't moving us forward, so where we can't get into deep thought and really move the ball forward in terms of our goals and projects and so on. So some of the things we can do is we can just schedule a block of time, probably when our energy is the lowest. It doesn't require a lot of mental energy. So you wouldn't pick your prime focus time when your energy is at its best and your ability to maintain attention is at its best. You would save that for the deeper things that have to get done, where more attention and accuracy or whatever, depending on your field, is important. But the shallow work can go into some of those lower energy times. Sometimes it's after a meal and so on. I've learned, however, I can't do it when I'm kind of spent for the day, because that's when I just do that mindless,
Right.
drifting with social media and so on. And I'm pretty good about it. But if I'm tired, I have no resistance. I'll just kind of veg out, and then 3 hours have gone by. It's like just totally a waste of time.
Absolutely. I hear you.
So Vanderkam recommends that we batch the little things. And there was another person, Stephanie, I can't remember Stephanie's last name, but she had a great program. And I love the way she did it. So she would start out with her calendar, and she just had a piece of paper with a line vertically down, roughly half and half. And on the right side, she would identify all the, she'd brain dump all the things she needed to do. You could do that on sticky notes as well, but she would just list them in no particular order. And on the left side, she would write the days of the week. And then she would pick the things on the right side that were the rocks and put them in first. And then she would take them and, the next would be the pebbles,
Right.
the lesser things, and just keep filling that in. And I really liked it because it made sure that you got the rocks in. What it didn't do, and I don't mean this as a criticism by any way, because I thought it was really effective, was not batching those little things. So it's easy to stuff it in here and there, but if you know you have a reliable time block that you can take care of certain categories of things, try not to mix and match too much. It tends to increase the likelihood that you'll be able to bang them out. And the point that Vanderkam talks about, we've mentioned Parkinson's law before. I don't know if you remember, but Parkinson's law is the time it takes to complete something is the time we make available to it.
Okay.
And so if we, the classic situation, we can't get a lot of things done until we want to go on vacation, and then we have to get them done before we go, and we get them done.
Right.
Such a novel concept. But so we can artificially constrict the time and just say, I'm going to do this in an hour on such and such a day. But then coupling that with BJ Fogg's habit recipes, we anchor it to some particular event. And then we identify what the behavior is we're going to do in that time frame. And then we have to celebrate it when we do it, because that reinforces the idea. So what is popping up in your brain as I'm talking?
So again, I put all those rocks in first, and I know what they are, and they, appear on my calendar. But what I'm finding is that my brain says you're going to be intentional. Okay. You need to focus. But then my other side of the brain says, you know what? You are too tired. You don't feel good. You got to take care of something else. And it becomes so real to me that it's like, now I'm making an excuse why I'm not getting something accomplished. And I really honed in on this last week. Here I was, I had my computer all set up, finished, my daily work on Tuesday. And here I was going to go to my meeting at 7:30, and I knew I was tired. I knew I was stressed. But I also knew that this meeting takes all that away from me and allows me to feel better. And yet all I could do was concentrate on, I don't feel well. I'm tired. My husband needs me. I'm just not going to go. And then I look back and it's like, but I could have gone and none of this would have interrupted it. But in my brain, I kept thinking it would.
So it sounds to me like that has something to do with your energy management in terms of the timing of how the day went, perhaps relative to the meeting. So
Yep.
if that meeting, for instance, were a big rock, or let's just call it a pebble, maybe not to overemphasize it, because, that'll be the nature of a lot of things. Then how was your energy going into that phase of the day? Because it's late it's an early evening.
So my energy typically on that day of the week, by 5 o'clock, I'm zapped. And so what I went ahead and did the next day, I contacted one of my clients who I usually have a standing week appointment from 4 to 5 on Tuesdays. And I said, instead of doing it weekly, what if we skip the third week of the month? And he said, oh, that would be terrific. And it was like, oh my gosh, it was like, I could take that big rock out of there because I didn't need to deal with that. And so I sort of practiced that the next day, that if I had that time slot open, what was I going to feel like at 7:30 in the evening? And, I knew there were other things that I needed to do, make dinner, clean up, whatever. And I found that I had just enough time to sit back for about maybe a half hour, 45 minutes before this 7:30 time slot. And I thought, now this is what I can do on Tuesdays. And I'm going to practice it again tomorrow and see how it works.
Yeah, so love it. I mean, it's a perfect example of, paying attention to what's going on. So it isn't just that we have a list of tasks to do. We have to couple it with our um, energy level because if we're spent, we're spent, mentally, and you
Right.
just can't get the body to do what it needs to do, even if these are minor tasks. Otherwise, you're just asking yourself to become a gutter ball in terms of your attention. It's just going to go into the gutter and like straight to the return system. And so, what else occurs to you in terms of your calendaring
Well,
and
I have,
your energy?
yeah. So I do have to be more intentional about it because early morning, I'm raring to go. And that's why I had put something on my calendar for 7 o'clock, thinking that was great, but realizing 7 o'clock is not where my energy is. My energy really starts around 8 o'clock in the morning, and I have basically full energy until 10, and then I seem to wean. And so, what I did for my calendar this week is, try to block it so that from 10 or 10:30 to maybe noon, I have a break in there. And I actually have nothing written down for that time because that's going to be, free time. If I have the energy to do something and want to, hey, I've got the time. Or if I just don't want to do anything, I still have that time.
Well, if I may, I'm going to insert an idea. So I'm not saying that every time has to be scripted and productive, but one of the things you may want to consider after that first burst of energy and you have a space that you've proactively put there, then you might want to go outside for just a few minutes. Even on a cold day, there's something about nature that is rejuvenating. And it could mean that you could enjoy that time that you're not doing, you're just being,
Right.
and have a greater sense of fulfillment and enjoyment from the day. And then that can pace you throughout the remainder of the day. And then, if you've pre-programmed some of your deep work and your shallow work, then it can be a nice pace, but it's under your control, not just the whims of your energy, which can be, a factor of, did you get enough sleep? What did you eat? When did you eat? All sorts of things,
Sure.
cumulative sleep for the week up to that point, and so on. So the whole point is we can be little citizen scientists regarding ourselves and say, all right, what's optimum for me? How do I want to do this? And even if you're not going to work and you're not striving for some big goal or something, it can still bring more enjoyment and to do the things and have the energy to do the things that you want to be able to do.
Well, and I find it interesting. So yesterday, I was subbing for one of my IT partners, and I knew I was going to be out of the house, for 4 hours plus. And Rich and I were going out last night, and typically, I come home from the job and I'm tired. And yesterday, what I did was when I finished my shift and was sitting in my car while I was waiting for my seat to warm up and everything, I have a CD in my car that I love the performer. And I sat there and I listened to the first 7 songs on there, which took me to a different place. It was like, I'm not tired anymore. This music energizes me. I was thinking of my friend, whose CD it is. And just a lot of maybe unintentional thoughts were getting into my head, but they were all pleasant. So now when I drove home, I was energized. Whereas most days I would tell you that I probably don't even remember leaving work, and all of a sudden I see myself pulling into my garage.
After driving that 2,000 ton, or
Yep.
the whatever,
Yep.
2-ton vehicle home, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Semi-consciously, yes. You know, so I love that as well, because what it's saying is that you are finding other ways to rejuvenate, in essence. It doesn't have to be going out in nature, but it's something else that switches your brain from all the, right-sided analytical stuff and so on, and now you're just kind of in that relaxed mode. Maybe
Exactly.
your brain waves have even changed from the active stuff to the more chill things, to be scientific.
You
So
got it.
Vanderkam lists 6 steps to basically harnessing the shallow time and putting boundaries on it. So you've just naturally identified some of them. So we're identifying small tasks, right? So that it's easier to pick up on which ones are the deep work and which are the shallow work. And then you had a sense of how much time you needed to get them done. All right, so you had that on the calendar. And then you started to identify, just noticing where you were getting stuck, and basically, in terms of time of day, perhaps, or, time of the week. And then let me see what else you were doing here. You put things on the calendar. So are you writing any of this down in terms of the kinds of things that you're worried about? Because what happens with a lot of people is they're in a constant, hamster wheel mental cycle, in terms of, I got to do it now because I'm afraid I'll forget it. So does any of that ever happen to you?
So when I believe it's something really important that I have to do, it goes on my calendar. And it goes on my calendar with a reminder. So, I will get a ding on my phone or at the computer, wherever I am at the time, to remind me that this is something that I need to do or really want to do. Um, I don't put that on for everything. So, like, for instance, I've been wanting to call my brother out in California. And I know there are certain times of the day during the week I'll never reach him, even though he has a cell phone. He just doesn't answer it at those times. And so I intentionally have it on my computer constantly, that these are the times I could call him. But doesn't mean just because it pops up, I have to call him at that time or that day. It's just a reminder, because if I leave him a voicemail, he'll never call me back because he doesn't listen to voicemail.
Who
So
does?
he's hard to get through to. So, but I've gone like the last 2 weeks with these reminders. I haven't called them. And that's for a number of various reasons. Either I didn't have anything to say, or at the time it came up, I saw something that was more important to do at that time, or chose to do something less important.
Yeah, so it's a nice way to have it there, so you're not worried about forgetting it and having, before you know it, a month or 2 or 3 have gone by.
Right.
And but it's not the kind of alert that is hijacking your attention, that you have to stop everything and do it. It
Exactly.
sounds like. So that's a perfect thing. In other settings, in the authors of Winning the Week talk about the someday list, and it's kind of a riff on the David Allen get it done approach, where you basically brain dump everything and keep it on a master list, which I really kind of untethered me. It just seemed like way too long of a list. I'd never be able to find anything, and as if I was going to act on it, right?
Yep.
And but the authors of Winning the Week, Demure and Carrie Bentley, basically are saying the someday list is something that you can tickle for like once a month or once every other month, and look at it from time to time to see if anything on that list needs to be pulled into maybe your deep work or your shallow work. And the joke is, in many ways, you kind of know that it's going there to die, because Demir was just explaining recently that um, there's one thing about learning Spanish fluently. They live part-time in South America, and he said that he's been there 8 years on and off, and he's really lousy at Spanish, and he's embarrassed by it, but it keeps going on his list. And then he finally had to come to terms with it. It's on his someday list because it's not a priority, it's just something he'd like to do. And then he basically is rooting for it to finally rise to the level of being important enough to go on his deep work time now. And he pretends that he talks to it saying, come on, I'm going to keep you on the list for a while, but you got to work harder, if you're going to survive, kind of a thing. But we can be thinking about some of the competition for our time and our attention that way. And obviously the shallow work is, again, some of it has to be done, similar to brushing our teeth, but it doesn't have to hijack us entirely.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that my husband has complained about with me, is that we'll be sitting either eating breakfast or dinner, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, and I get it from the table and I start doing it, and he'll say, what are you doing? And I just remembered this. And he'd go, okay, you can't do that like in 15 minutes when we're done eating. And I'll look at him and it's like, like he's the crazy one. Okay. Like, of course I can't do it later. And then I realized, what was that really all about? It's like, this wasn't something that even had to get done, probably. So I'm trying to be more intentional about when those thoughts pop up is, do I really have to do this? So, yeah.
Yeah, and this phrase I just love from Demir and Carrie's book, Winning the Week, that we have a time supply. It's 168 hours a week. It's the same as Bill Gates gets, and
right.
Everybody else gets. And then we have the bids on our time. And that phrase, just bids on the time, it doesn't mean we have to do these things. And then we have to, make decisions about, you made the cut, you didn't make the cut, just like he was talking about. Maybe you're on a someday list. That's where you can brain dump everything. And then you can look at it periodically and just review it to see if something needs to be brought over. But in the meantime, you put all the big rocks in, towards goals and, personal development, and, all the stuff we say is important. And then the other stuff can be filtered in, but always being a good manager of the amount of time, the ratio of the shallow work to the deep work, and what constitutes shallow work. So the Bentleys also have a concept called TACO, and it's basically you either terminate the need to do something, you stop doing it, so I've eliminated several newsletters and so on because I just wasn't getting to them. Like, why delude myself and just junk up my email?
Right.
And if it was important enough, I'm gonna Google the topic anyway. And the second would be automate it. So that's recurring calendar items like you just described, so that, okay, it's going to pop up again, kind of like the magic 8-ball, it's going to appear periodically, and you'll have an option to decide, thumbs up or thumbs down, whether it gets on your calendar. Then the second or third is you consolidate them. So that's where we're talking about the shallow work, bunch it into time blocks so that, you're going to be really rigorous in terms of the time you get to do it. Maybe turn on some jazzy music, whatever, while you're doing it, just to kind of energize things. And then finally, the O in TACO is outsource it, get somebody else to do it. Martha Beck calls that better it, barter it, bag it. And so everybody has their own concept on that.
Absolutely. Wow. What a conversation again. And we didn't plan this.
Right, exactly. So going into the week, I have some, rigorous pruning to do on some of my shallow work, and I think it'll be a never-ending thing, but it's opening up new things for me. So I hope it's doing the same for you and anyone
It
that's
is.
listening.
And I find it interesting that when we have things planned and then something else important happens around us, how all of a sudden we can sort of adjust ourselves and still get everything accomplished that we wanted to, even if that hadn't popped up. Uh, Last week we happened to have lost a friend, and on Friday there was the wake, and on Saturday morning there was the funeral service. And my original thought, and I looked at the calendar, was, how am I going to do this? And then I just, put it in there, and we did it. It didn't disrupt anything. And so I think sometimes for me, I start to panic that, you know, how can I get these all done when something like falls from the sky and you feel like you've got to add that in?
Exactly. And Vanderkam talks about that in her TED Talk, but also in her book 168 Hours about the broken water tank. And 7 hours out of this person's week was allocated, had to be, can't avoid it. And
Right.
yet we perpetually live our lives as if we don't have enough time. And it's the point is we can make the time. We have to make the time sometimes. So
Absolutely. Well, in today's show notes, I'm going to put in links to Laura Vanderkam because I know we've been talking about her a lot. I started reading 168 hours because I felt that, you know, sometimes I think I have, 500 hours in a week. Uh,
your
and
time eyes are bigger than your time stomach.
yeah, exactly. And it's always been that way. Um, but since I started reading it, I am realizing, hey, like you said in the beginning, I don't have to have every minute accounted for, and that's okay.
Yeah,
And I'm just getting used to it. So we'll see if I can continue to be intentional. Thank
sounds
you
good.
again for today's conversation, and we will be back in 2 weeks. Everybody stay warm and dry, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care, Karen.
Bye bye.